All right, what's going on, folks? We are live, and thank you for tuning in. It's just another episode of Adventure Talk Live. If you're watching live, we've got the chat open if you've got any questions, or if you're listening to this later as a podcast. Hope you enjoy it. Today, I am joined by Adam Biedrzycki, and we are going to just be talking about backpacking stories. So, all kinds of stuff from people who've been backpacking for a while, questions about gear, just telling fun stories, just talking about all things backpacking. So, welcome, Adam.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, I want to talk about just kind of how we got connected. And I think it kind of tells an interesting story about the backpacking, hunting, hiking, just the outdoors community in general, because I think we were just mutual members of a backpacking Facebook group. We had never talked, never met, didn't know each other before. And I think you just shared some photos on there. Looked pretty cool. And then I saw you had a YouTube channel, and then we just started chatting from there, and we made this thing happen.
Yeah. So I got connected with Facebook groups and everything. I'm trying to be more connected with them. Like I said, I started a YouTube channel in January. So it's a pretty new YouTube channel. Kind of documents my trips. I give a couple tips to people. It's pretty small. I only have like 120 subscribers. I just hit 3,000 views, but it's a lot of fun. It's a good way to document and to share with the community.
Yeah. And what's the name of your channel?
It's Hawkeye Hikes. Hawkeye is my trail name, and hiking is what I like to do.
All right. So everybody go check out Hawkeye Hikes and definitely subscribe and hit the notification thing as well, because YouTube is kind of weird about that now. You don't really get any updates unless you hit that. Well, so I saw your most recent hike that you posted pictures on. That was Old Loggers Path. Tell me a little bit about that hike.
Old Loggers Path. It's a trail in the trailhead's in Maston, Pennsylvania. It's in north central Pennsylvania. It's a 27.1 mile. It's a loop, and it goes through the old logging communities of north central PA. That's a trail I've wanted to do for a while. It's a trail I actually just completed 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to do it about 6 months ago. And the washouts were so bad in Pennsylvania. The trailhead was closed, and my girlfriend and I actually drove up there Friday night after work once. Tried to find it. We were driving through state game lands, like 20 miles through, one lane, pothole, washout roads. I didn't know it at the time. I found out like 4 days later I had mono. So I was like stopping the car and like throwing up every like 3 minutes.
Oh, man.
It's raining. Like we can't find the place. We're both starting to like panic a little bit because I'm like, my blood sugar's low. I'm starting to get sick. Washouts, can't find it. We asked people, if you've heard of Old Loggers Path, or like, I haven't even heard of the place. We're like, that's it. So we stopped the car, set up the tent on the road. The road's washed out right in front of us. Like we're thinking the tent's going to wash away. My car's going to wash away in the middle of the night. Make it through the night, wake up the next morning, just drive home. Say like, we're never doing that trail again. But we looked forward to it. We did the research. We got the trail guides. We got the maps. So finally got it together, put a trip together, got there, no problem. Got a roundabout way to get there. So we didn't have any problems at all, but it turned out to be a really great weekend. It's one of my favorite trails now. Very easy from beginner to expert. I would highly recommend that trail. Plenty of water sources, plenty of campsites everywhere. So ended up being a great time.
Very cool. How I guess formal was the trail? Meaning like how well marked and signed was it? And was it a well-worn path, or was it something? Sounds like there was some trouble locating it initially. Was it something that once you were on it, it was pretty solid?
Once we got on it, orange blazes everywhere. Probably one of the most well-marked trails I've ever been on.
Okay.
Old Loggers Path. It's old truck grades for logging vehicles. So really well-established, wide trails, nothing too steep or too aggressive, but it really takes you through like the rolling endless mountains. That's the area up in north central PA. So
okay. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely at least hill country up there.
Yeah. So elevation's usually around like 2,500 feet. So nothing crazy. It was just water everywhere. We saw one person in 2.5 days on the trail. That's how I like it. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's nice. It seems like there's a lot of the beautiful trails that are comfortable, and especially some of the ones that are a little bit more easy and less intimidating. Sometimes they just get overcrowded really quickly. That's cool. So that was 27 miles. That was what, a 3-day?
We did that in a little over 2 days. 2 days and change. We did 10 miles the first day. Actually, it was 2 days, 10 miles the first day and 17 miles the second day. So it was me, my buddy Duchess, and my girlfriend, and we probably pushed her a little harder out of her comfort zone than we wanted to, but got to learn somehow.
Yeah, yeah. So did you start early morning, or did you like camp at the trailhead the night before? How did you start it out?
We woke up early. We left Delaware. I live in Delaware. We left Delaware around 6 a.m. Swung by Philly, picked up Duchess, drove up. It was about 4.5 hours. We finally got on the trail about 12:30, and
Okay.
then hiked until about 6. We found a nice campsite with a shelter, and I didn't sleep in the shelter. Duchess did. It's the first time he ever slept in a shelter. I was testing out one of my new tents. I have the Tarp Tent Motrail,
Okay.
and I had kind of a bad experience with the time before, and I wanted to give it a really good shot. And
Yeah.
I knew it was going to rain. I knew it was going to be a little windy that night. So I was like, I'm sleeping in this tent. I'm going to see how it goes because I don't want to be out on one of my longer trips bringing this piece of equipment and not know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate way to test it out, is really to
Yeah.
put it on a track that you know is it's gonna test it enough where you're gonna learn something, but probably not be so grueling that it's destructive.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm still hiking and camping with nothing fancy at all. It's just an old Kelty half dome, but it's just kind of old faithful for me. Nothing fancy, but it works. It gets the job done.
I have a Kelty pack. My first pack was a Kelty, and I bought a second pack, and that's a Kelty too. So kind of, I know what it is. I know what I'm getting out of it. It's not the lightest. It's not the most high speed, but it's very sturdy. It's durable. I've probably putting it through more shit than it needed to go through, and keeps on pumping out for me. So I think Kelty's a pretty good brand.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
What about some other backpacking treks that you've done, either recently or a little while back? Just tell me about some of your other adventures.
Okay. Past summer, I went up to New England and I did Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And I had 2 weeks of vacation time and I wanted to squeeze as much backpacking as I could. So loaded up the buddy's truck and we drove from Delaware to Maine, hit Acadia National Park, which is a beautiful national park, don't get me wrong. But if you're going for backpacking, you can really stomp it out in 2 days, hit all the trails, and move on to the
Okay.
next place. So then we went to Baxter State Park, where Mount Katahdin is, and Katahdin is the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. So it's very popular. I'm sure you've heard of it, or
I've heard the name, but I did not know that was actually the northern end.
Yep. If you're going south to north, that's where the Appalachian Trail ends, and if you start in the north, that's where it starts. That was a super cool trail. They say allot yourself 12 hours to do it. We did it like the back way, which is through Knife's Edge, and it takes you right up to the summit, which is great. I'm talking like it's called Knife's Edge, and it's like this.
Oh goodness!
You're way up there, and you hit one corner, and the wind starts ripping. It was June when we went. Woke up, it was about 75 degrees. There's like plenty of false summits. We got to what we thought was the summit, and it started snowing, and then it started icing, and then the snow stopped, and we could see over on the summit like another storm coming, but we had to keep going on Knife's Edge. Once you get out there, like you have to go. They can't even rescue you. They have to basically talk you. You have got to keep going because they can't send helicopters there. They can't bring you out. It's steep, but it was definitely an experience that I'll never forget. So that was good. Yeah.
What's the elevation there?
The elevation is, let me see, I actually think I have it written here. 5,267 feet.
Okay.
So
it sounds like it's just crazy steep and just real rough.
It is, and it's a lot of granite shooting out of the ground, and you feel like you're higher. It's Baxter State Park. It's northern Maine, and you can look out and you don't see anything. You might see a ranger station like 10 miles away in the distance, but you really feel like you're at the top of the world. And I mean, that's one of the higher places I've ever been, but really feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere. New Hampshire, also in the White Mountains, we did the Pemigewasset Wilderness, and those were some trails. You get above the tree line, and the skies open up. You get wind, you get rain, you get snow. The White Mountains, that's where the presidential traverses, like Mount Washington, and that's actually the windiest place on Earth. So the weather will change faster on Mount Washington than any other place.
Oh, wow.
So it's cool. And like I said, I live in Delaware, so I can get to all these places in, 12, 14 hours. So it's pretty great.
That's really cool. And it sounds like, so I mean, I'm in Texas, and
Yeah.
I've done a fair amount of hiking out west, quite a bit in Texas, but it seems like up north you have a lot more diversity of terrain. You have a lot bigger, older woods, you've got mountains, you've got hills. I mean, there's a lot of flat and then some nice desert hiking in Texas, but it seems like you've got quite a bit up there.
Yeah, something I kind of take for granted. I've lived in Pennsylvania, then I moved to Maryland, then Delaware, so I've always kind of been on the East Coast. But I mean, I think it's one of those things where the grass is always greener. I look at people in Texas, and I look at people in Colorado, Wyoming, and California, and the hiking they're doing, and I'm just green with envy because I just want to get out there so bad and do the Continental Divide Trail or the
Yeah.
Pacific Crest Trail, or I want to get out there. It's on my list. So
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think that list is, I don't know, once you get into it, it doesn't shrink, I don't think.
yeah, I
I
don't think
think
so
every
either.
time you scratch one off, you add about 2 or 3 more on there.
Definitely.
Well, you were telling me earlier before this thing turned live, just that you've gotten kind of head over heels into backpacking. You've done a lot recently, but you actually haven't been doing it that long. You said it was about 2 years ago when you kind of first got fired up about it.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in May. Me and a coworker who's now one of my close friends and definitely my backpacking buddy, we were talking about it, and we just decided to go one time. And we picked a weekend, and we picked a trail. We picked the Catskills, which is about 3.5 hours away from us. Didn't do much research on anything. I think we used backpacks, and we had big Nalgene bottles that weigh half a pound each, and a Camelback on top of that. And went to Walmart and got fire starter logs and emergency ponchos, and the saws, the survival saws. Um, Drove up there. It rained. I think we were wearing like jeans and sweatshirts and just soaking in wet cotton. Couldn't get the fire started.
Yeah.
Had the cans of chili that weren't able to get warm because we didn't have a fire. We're just eating chili out of a can, which we have to pack out with us too, which doesn't make any sense. We're carrying empty cans on top of all this water and all this extra, probably 35 pounds of stuff that we didn't really need. Big survival knife strapped to my waist. I don't guess I thought I was going to Vietnam or something like that.
Interrupting you really quick. I think everybody has done the chili thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I truck camp enough that, yeah, it works fine there. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times I'll make my own chili or do whatever. But I had a similar experience the first time I hiked Eagle Mountain Loop in Arkansas. I have a video of when we actually completed it. But before that, there was a failed attempt where we had somebody who just couldn't make it. So we all decided to turn back. But it was a similar type of deal. We had like full propane stoves, big old cans of wolf chili. And of course, we didn't want to bring a can opener because that would be ridiculous. So we were there just like rubbing the chili can against the rocks, trying to like pry it open. Yet we still had this big steel can. I think everybody's been there.
And it's insane because, I mean, like I said, this was only 2 years ago. So 2017, we had every resource in the world available at our fingertips. But the extent of our research we did was, let's find like this trail, which it was the tallest peak in the Catskills. It's Slide Mountain, and it's in the Slide Mountain wilderness. And we thought we were going to be a couple of badasses going up there on a weekend, and camped right off the trail, got there, hiked. We were sweating. We get to the trailhead. There's a clearing, and we think we like conquered the world, and we're going to see all this. There's trees at the summit because it's not above tree line, so you can't see anything. Look a little further, there's like a picnic table with people, popping champagne and baskets of chicken, and there's actually like an easy way up the trail. And like we're there like dirty, like grubby, like we didn't sleep the night before. We have all this like military surplus stuff with us and everything. People are just glaring at us like they drive out from New York and it's like their day, like it's their picnic basically.
And they're like, how long have you been here?
Yeah, exactly.
That was, I hiked Grand Teton last summer, and we came down, and it was I guess we were up there for about 3 days, but we were going at a pretty decent clip. And then when we came down, we were just disgusting from the hike as anybody normally is. But that area, we were around Jenny Lake. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Tetons at all, but it's like the super touristy loop. And, you know, there's a boat that will take you across the lake so that you don't have to hike the 1 extra mile around there. And everybody's just like, you know, taking pictures with their iPhones, and it's just super, super touristy. And we're coming down just like looking disgusting. And then we're like, we'll just play it up like we're just really hardcore.
Yeah. That was the thing. I don't know why when I started, I wanted to be like so hardcore about it. I slept in a bivy sack with a poncho over me, and Duchess slept with a trash bag over him. And then one day he was just like, I'm done. He's like, he had a tent. So he was like, I'm bringing the tent the next time. And, you know, I was calling him a sissy, telling him he doesn't need that thing. So we go on this hike, and this was probably 3 weeks after. So we're already bitten by the bug, and we're trying to go out as often as we can.
Yeah.
And same type of deal after work. So we get to the trailhead at like 9 p.m. in June, and in June in Pennsylvania around 9 p.m. it's just nothing but humid, and the bugs are just really biting you at that point. Yeah. We're hiking and starting the thunderstorm. So we're like, all right, we'll set up camp. So I set up my little poncho hooch, and he sets up his tent, and I'm trying to adjust my 550 cord and get everything nice and tight for the night. And there's just like, it's just not going because it's not able to tie down right. He's in his tent. It's nice and comfortable. I see his lantern go on. I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm just going to go to sleep. As soon as I start to close my eyes, you hear the thunder go, and then starts the torrential downpour. And I'm sitting there, and like my poncho's laying on my head like this, and like the rain's like pitter pattering on it. I was just like, I was so miserable, and I could hear a bag of chips open from inside his and I'll never forget that, because like the rain's starting to like come up, like, you know, I'm sitting in like an inch of rain at this point. I hear the chips open. I hear him start taking crunch of chips. I'm just like, look over. I see like a silhouette of him like open a newspaper, because we were gonna have a fire. So he brought some like newspaper to use as starter. So he's reading, eating chips, dry in his tent, and I'm just soaking wet. I woke up.
You're just sitting there soggy while he's crunching away.
Probably got 30 minutes of sleep that night. Finished the trail the next day. Threw my bivy sack, threw my tarp away in the dumpster before I got in my car, and went out and got a tent like 2 weeks later. And that was it. I've been in a tent ever since. I don't need to be tough, if that's what that means. I'm going to be comfortable.
Man, well, there's a lot to be said for getting a good night's sleep on the trail. Because if you don't, like, it doesn't matter how hardcore you are, or, you know, how ultralight you are, if you don't get enough rest to be, you know, fully energized and fulfilled for the next day.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm the same way. I use a tent. One thing that I've done truck camping, but have never had the guts to take it out on a for real backpacking trip is just going with a hammock. Have you ever done that?
I haven't hammock camped. I'd like to. I feel like at this point, I'm so invested in sleeping on the ground. I got the ground pad. I got the tent. It's what I'm used to. Making the switch, I feel like I'm just wasting all the stuff I have from my tent. I've slept in hammocks, or I guess I could say I've passed out in hammocks before, and I've been all right in them, but I've never slept in them. I have a couple friends who refuse to sleep on the ground, and they only go out with a hammock, and that's how they want to stay.
Yeah. I went on, it was, I was in Big Bend, and I was very thankful that I did not have a hammock, because there were no trees the entire time.
That's another problem, yeah.
And so that kind of sticks in my head a little bit. Now, if you know even a little bit about the area beforehand, typically that's not really an issue, because you'll know if it's woods or desert or mountain, or you'll at least know that much. But I've always brought one on like hunting trips and truck camping trips, just because, you know, I like to set it up and just to relax. And I wanted to take it on a backpacking trip, but I've just never quite gutted it up enough to do it.
It's a lot smaller and a lot lighter.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, but then if you start throwing like a cover over the top, and if you have nice straps and you start adding to it, it quickly becomes close to the weight of a tent.
Yeah, you got your hammock, you got your underquilt, you got your overquilt, you got your tarp, you got your stakes, you got your bug net. You might as well be in a tent. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's everything but poles, really.
Yeah.
And you said that you're in that tarp tent right now?
Yeah, I got the tarp tent Motrail for Christmas, and that is a 2-person ultralight tent. It comes in about 36 ounces, I think, so just over a pound per person.
Nice.
If 2 people are splitting it, it's not heavy enough where I think it requires 2 people to split. But I had some trouble with it the first time I set it up. The last tent I had was it was the REI Half Dome 2, and that's it's a freestanding tent, so you don't have to worry about staking anything down. Basically sets up anywhere. It's like a pop-up tent, and you don't have to worry about anything. It's a lot heavier. It's about 6 pounds, but making the switch to something where my mow trail, it uses trekking poles to support it.
Yeah.
So you
Was
really need to
that
scale it down.
was that REI Half Dome too? Was that the? It was like navy and gray with like gold trim on it.
Yeah, mine was green, but they have the 2 colors, so that's the one you're thinking of.
So I think that was the exact same tent I had for like 10 years. Like I
Yeah.
got it when I was in Boy Scouts.
Okay.
And I took it on like my very first backpacking trip. And that was like the tent I had when I very first got into backpacking. And then I didn't really get to hike much for a long time.
Yeah.
And, I would go like truck camping and stuff every once in a while and always bust that thing out. And then when I got back into it, I was using that tent again. And it was just crazy how long. I mean, by the time I switched away from it, it was just ratty and nasty. But that thing
Yeah.
just held up like a champ. And
Oh,
like you said, it's a little heavier. It's it's not the most technical, it's not the fanciest, but I was just blown away just by how long that thing held up.
it's great. I mean, it sets up easy. It's durable. The wind never got in. The rain never got in. I can set up anywhere. It's not even so much the weight that bothered me. It was the bulkiness of it. I don't like to strap things to the outside of my pack. I feel a little bit like a gypsy when I have things rattling around. So I like everything to be tucked in real nice and tight inside my pack. And it was taking up, close to 40-50% of my pack. It's time to get something smaller.
So you hike internal frame, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I feel like I was one of the last holdouts. Like I said, it was kind of in the same generation as that REI Half Dome tent. I had an external frame, and I just like the idea that you can just strap anything to the outside of it, and it's anything you need to put on there, you can. And then after probably way too long, I realized, well, that's not necessarily a good thing. Like you shouldn't just have like extra random items that you're tying on. Like you should get everything dialed in and trimmed out.
I mean, that's a huge advantage to a hunter going out there. I mean, it's kind of what you're used to, right? Having to be able to the fact that it's so modular that you can just add things to it and strap things down.
Yeah. So. But now that I made the switch to internal, like I'm not going back.
What kind of pack are you using now?
It's hanging over there. It's a Kelty Redstone. So I think it's one of their like cheaper middle of the line packs, but it's comfortable. So I like it.
Good.
Well, so we've talked tents, we've talked packs. What other, is there a comfort or luxury item? It seems like most backpackers, they're very strict about weight and very disciplined in a lot of things. But then there's just sometimes these special items that are either meaningful on trail or just provide some extra degree of comfort. Is there anything like that you take on your treks?
Yeah, there's a couple. And actually, one of the first YouTube videos I put out was it was during the whole phase of luxury item when people were tagging each other and everything. And I kind of came out and said, like, can we stop calling them luxury items and just items that we like to have? There's no reason we can't be comfortable out there. So I bring a lot of things that make me comfortable because I've had experiences where I've tried to be tough and at the end of the day, I'm just not comfortable. Like I said, weight doesn't really concern me as much as my pack size and being able to fit stuff in there. So there's a few things I bring. I do bring a trail journal. It's like a little index card size. I write at the end of the night just kind of how far I went, kind of what I ate. My watch tells me about how many calories I burned, just stupid statistics like that. And then I write some, more personal like memories from the day. And I look back on, I enjoy reading. I probably every few months I'll go back and I'll read it and it'll say something like, oh, this was the most miserable day of my life. And then like 3 pages later, it'll be like, this is the most miserable day of my life. And it feels like it at the time when you're cold and you're wet. And I just keep going back. But the journal is one of them. Another one, I have a trapper hat with like faux rabbit fur I got from Cabela's. And I don't know, I like to sleep in it and button it up. And I just like that. And that's probably, 6 or 7 ounces and takes up a lot of space. But I'll bring that all the time. And finally, I bring a thermos, which weighs about 12 ounces. But I like to cook my food in it. And then I dehydrate my own food. So it saves me fuel. It's a little heavier and bulkier. A lot of people are into cold soaking. Not sure if you've heard of that. It's where they just go stoveless. They decide they don't want to bring a stove. So they just soak their food in. And
I can't do
a
it.
hot meal at the end of the day. breakfast and lunch I can eat cold. I eat my oatmeal cold, but dinner I like to have a nice hot dinner. So I bring a thermos, and that's pretty much it. But overall, I bring a lot of extra stuff that I don't need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and all those sound, very reasonable and comfortable and
Yeah.
makes sense.
How about you?
Man, I feel like I haven't even analyzed it that much. I feel like a lot of times my luxury items, or I guess, but at your request, we won't call them luxury items, but I tend to overpack or over prepare almost out of that idea of comfort.
Yeah.
Like I have never been close to running out of food.
Yeah.
And I feel that's just maybe it's just weird paranoia of mine that I'm like, I don't want to ever potentially be lacking energy for lack of food or anything like that. So I don't know if that's necessarily a comfort item as much as just I haven't dialed in the right, I don't know, the right perspectives and figured out exactly what I need. Cause I feel like I get close and then I always throw in a little bit of extra stuff that just gets heavy and kind of wasteful and inefficient.
Yeah.
And a little bit the same with clothes. I tend to bring probably a little bit too much clothing for most of the hikes, but it's just because I like being comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, clothes and food, doesn't seem too luxury to me. Seems
Yeah,
very,
well, I overdo it. I
yeah.
overdo it.
No, I mean, I bring extra clothes too. I'll bring extra pants. I'll bring plenty of extra socks. I'll bring extra underwear, and I usually just end up wearing the same thing the whole trip. And
Yeah.
but like you said, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yep. And I always bring too much camera gear as well,
Okay.
just because I'm I'm paranoid about, I don't know, going on some beautiful trek and then looking back and being like, wow, I didn't document any of that. And it sounds like you do kind of the same, but through journaling.
Right.
And I just have realized like I'll be so afraid that, oh, what if I run out of batteries? So I'll charge up extra batteries and like a spare battery brick. And I'm like, that's insane. Why did I bring that much stuff? I remember it was last summer in Teton. Like I had, we were truck camping for a couple days, or I guess one day before we went up the mountain. But I even had it was fairly light, but still I had a camera tripod with me and I was standing there at the truck. Like, should I bring the tripod? And then I was like, why am I even considering that? That's ridiculous. This thing's huge. So I don't know. For me, I think the comfort items is almost out of a paranoia of, I guess I was always like on all these hunting trips and back in Boy Scouts, I take the be prepared metaphor, well, not even metaphor, but just like lifestyle and mindset. I take it very seriously, but I tend to overdo it. I'm like, well, I want gear for every scenario. But I
Yeah.
think on a backpacking trip, that's not realistic. You got to just say, well, I'm going to have faith that my gear's not going to fail me. I don't need a secondary and tertiary backup because I've got good gear and I know how to use it.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's kind of a weakness.
Rather have it. I mean, it's being unprepared. That's most people that search and rescue. They end up for the people going out and, oh, I don't need this and I don't need this. Reminds me of the beginning of Black Hawk Down when they're saying you don't need the water, you don't need the extra magazines, and they go out there. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch, but it's the same type of thing that always plays in my head. I'm like, do I need it? Do I need the extra AA batteries? Do I need the extra AAA batteries? You know what? It's 0.2 ounce. I'm throwing in my bag.
Yeah.
And tell you what, those 0.2s and 0.2s that I keep throwing in my bag, it adds up at the end of the day, but I never sit on the trail and say, I wish I had XYZ, because I usually have it in my bag at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to hump it around, then it's worth it, I guess. But if it ever gets to a point where it's the straw that broke the camel's back or your back, then I guess that's when you know. Well, what's a piece of gear? You mentioned the tarp tent. We've talked about packs and all that, but is there any other piece of gear that you're just really excited about, or has changed the way you hike, or has just got you to think about things differently?
Probably this GoPro 5 I picked up probably 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So in addition to starting my YouTube channel and everything, I needed a camera that wasn't my cell phone. Try to document it a little bit. I got the shoulder mount, and I can just kind of hit play and just see where it goes. And I don't have to set up a tripod or, reach for anything, make sure my phone's, tucked away. So the GoPro I'm excited about. The tarp tent I'm very excited about. I like the fact that it uses my trekking poles to set up. Gear that uses other gear always kind of gets me excited. It's ultra lightweight, super spacious. So between those two things, I'm pretty much set for the season. I am probably going to buy a new pack within the next few months, something a little lighter than the Kelty, which has been nothing but great to me, as I told you earlier. But I'm at the point now where trying to tighten it up a little bit, dial in my base weight, and see where it goes.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I think that I've had various GoPros, and that's how I've filmed a whole lot of my stuff. I've done some that are, I'll bring my Canon camera around, but I think that Tetons hike, I ended up either filling up the memory card or running out of battery, something, and then I just filmed the whole second half of it with a GoPro, and then I was just amazed at how well that turned out for, a camera that's that compact and light, and especially the 5. I feel like the 5 was kind of the game changer because that was the first one where you don't have to put the case on it, right?
Yeah, that's waterproof out of the box, and I think that's a big game changer. Like you said, the other ones with the cases and just trying to get in and get out and charge it, and this is just, it's waterproof. It's good to go. The stabilization's good. I've been nothing but pleased with it so far. Audio is a little hit or miss, but it is a GoPro, so you can't really expect that much.
But it's still way better than like the 3 and 4 where you have to have that plastic housing around it. That just like there's not even usable audio in my opinion from those. But the 5, 6, and 7 audio wise is kind of all the same in my opinion.
The stabilization's a lot better on the 7 than it is on the 5. And then there's this GoPro Fusion. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's the one that shoots 360 degrees, I think. And I'm not sure if I need that for what I'm doing. So I'm just going to stick to the 5 for now.
I've seen some footage of the Fusion, and it's really exciting to me. And I'm tempted to buy it, but it's way more expensive than the regular GoPro. And I keep I get excited about it, and then I manage to be reasonable and talk myself out of it. Yeah. But it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's hard with stuff like that. Drop something like $600 on a GoPro when you know they're going to have the next model out in like 6 months. So
yeah,
I kind of like to wait around and see. And then I got this with like the eco packaging. I got it for I think $200, which is nice. So
do you carry extra batteries with you, or how do you manage charging?
I carry a charging block with me, out XE. It's like a 2100 milliamp. It can usually get me about 4 full charges on I have a Samsung phone, which is good, but it also the power. It's one of those rugged power blocks that weighs like 1.2 pounds, so it's very heavy. But then I also carry 2 extra GoPro batteries with me, so I should have enough probably for about 3 days of shooting. Conservative.
That's very similar to my GoPro setup. And I don't remember even what brand my charging block is, but it's same type of deal.
Yeah.
Trying to think about other gear that we have not covered yet. Boots or hiking shoes?
I started with boots like most people, and now I wear trail runners. I wear the Ultra Lone Peak 3.5s, and I just wore them tonight out to dinner. I mean, they're so comfortable. They have the wide toe box.
Yeah.
They're ventilated. They don't get wet. I had Merrell boots, and I think Merrell's a great company. I have other running shoes that are Merrell's. I just think that waterproof boots aren't for me. They're great at keeping water out, but as soon as water gets into them, you're stuck with wet feet. Yeah, you have spongy feet for the whole weekend. Like the Gore-Tex, just in general, doesn't matter Merrell or whoever, Solomon. Once that water gets in, and usually if it's raining hard enough, it's going to slide down your leg and soak up your sock, and then it just won't dry out.
Yeah, there are breathable boots and there are waterproof boots, and they are mutually exclusive.
Yep. So do you hike in boots or do you hike in shoes?
So I definitely started off boots, and I'd say I'm still there. I'm now with low tops.
Okay.
But I started off with kind of like your story with your 12-inch combat knife. I started off just hiking in combat boots.
Yeah.
And that actually wasn't bad in a lot of Texas because it's so rocky and you're kicking prickly pear and stuff like that. And for me, a lot of that was, when I'm going out hunting, especially out west, it's really rugged. You just need something that's going to hold up and give you good ankle support versus something like hiking where you really need to approach it from, I guess, an athlete's mindset, where you need to be comfortable and rugged, but you need something that's, streamlined to keep you going. And it's going to be the best for, I guess, your body and your movement rather than just like bulky and rugged and heavy. So I went from combat boots to, well, I think I first started off in Merrell, the original Merrell Moab, the mother of all boot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that same Gore-Tex, that it was reasonably waterproof, but it just, your feet would get soggy and I would get blisters, and
Yep.
you know, it was great to a point, but then after you hit a certain part, it's just like you couldn't keep your feet dry.
Yep.
So then I went to those combat boots, did that, played with various other styles of boots. Nothing that I was super happy with. And then I switched back to Merrell's, but they are the low top. I don't even remember the model number, but they're the low top, wide toe box. I think that's important. As you mentioned, I remember growing up, I had all these ingrown toenails and just like all kinds of foot issues, and just having that more comfortable toe box honestly resolves a lot of that. And I think it lets your feet spread out for more natural movement and a little better stability, even, especially on, you know, narrow trails or steep downhills. It seems like downhill tends to hurt my feet a lot more than uphill.
Oh yeah.
So now I use those Merrell low tops, but I did intentionally get the non-waterproof ones. They're just basically mesh, like they're basically mesh sneakers that are just a little bit thicker and a little taller than traditional trail runners.
I think that's what a lot of people getting into backpacking, getting into hiking, they think they see waterproof and they're like, "Oh, this is great." They don't see the other side. They haven't been out there. They don't know that you need your foot to be able to dry. You need it to be able to vent out. And also think one of the big benefits of the trail runner is, at the end of the day, I'm not like ready to get my boots off like I was. Like, my feet are fine in the sneakers of the trail runners at camp. And I don't feel the urge to like take my boots off and, like you said, let my hot spots or my toenails from going downhill. Just, I'm wearing sneakers. It's just comfortable.
Yeah, no, and that's worth a lot. And especially when you mentioned just the idea of having 2 or 3 ounces, I don't think there's anywhere that matters more than when you're lifting your feet all
Yeah.
day. Yeah, that's important. So, because I guess neither one of us use waterproof boots, what's your strategy for water crossings?
Um, it depends. If it's early in the day, I'll try to find some rocks and skip over some rocks or a log. If it's later in the day, or if it's just I know I'm going to get wet, I just go right through it. Sometimes, like I said, if I don't want to get my feet wet, I'll take my shoes and socks off, carry my boots over, my shoes rather, and just walk across. It all depends how I'm feeling. If it's cold, I like to keep my feet dry as long as I can.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. Early in the day versus late in the day makes a big difference, because
Yeah.
if you know you've got 10 more miles, 10
Mhm.
more miles in wet boots versus 10 more miles in perfectly dry boots is a huge difference. When I did Eagle Rock Loop in Arkansas, that was one that I think the water crossing slowed us down more than anything else. The actual trail, like, it's fairly steep, but it's not too terribly bad. But you're kind of just meandering through this valley, and you cross the same small river probably 6 times, 7 times, something like that. And there's a few of them where you can just skip over rocks and you don't have to worry about it. But then there's some where it's very seasonal. So if you go there in the fall, probably no problem. But if you hit it in the spring where they're getting all the rain, just forget about it. You're going to get wet. So I ended up, it's nothing fancy at all, but I basically just got like knockoff Crocs from Bass Pro that were just like the cheapest, ugliest, whatever. And
Mhm.
so those are just like my river shoes. And I don't know, I think they're like even like weaker and worse than like normal Crocs, I guess, because they're super light because they're like Tupperware, right?
Yeah.
It's just foot Tupperware, little pieces of foam. But those are just my walk through the river shoes, then put my other shoes back on. But I always am interested in other people's strategy for those crossings, because that does keep my feet nice and dry. But man, it is a time suck. Like, just
Yeah.
the idea of taking off your boots, putting on these other shoes, crossing, drying off your feet, putting your boots back on. And if you do that a couple times, like, that just blows your trail time.
Oh yeah. And then you have the people who hike in sandals,
Yeah.
like Chaco sandals, and they can just pretty much hike through it. I don't know how they do it. I could never imagine hiking in a sandal. I've never worn a sandal that's been comfortable enough to hike in, but like the Jesus sandals I'm talking about with all the straps and people. I
Oh
see
yeah,
them on the
Chacos
trail.
or Keens
Yeah,
or yeah.
I see them on the trail all the time, and I don't know how they do it. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think it would work for me.
I can't do it. And I've got a good buddy who may even listen to this, and he's been on several of these hikes that I talked about, and he hikes in Vibram Five Fingers.
Okay.
I can't
Yeah.
do it.
No
Those
way.
things, I think they're actually awesome boat shoes. I discovered, like, if you're ever going like on a river trip or you're kayaking and you realize like, well, my feet are gonna get wet, but I still need to protect my feet. Like they're great for that. But
Yeah.
like, and he runs in them too. He's a marathon runner, and
Wow.
I don't get it. To me, I need at least some kind of support because
Yep.
that's rough. Well, sounds like through all these experiences, either with gear or just seeing exciting trails, do you have any either intense or scary moments or places where you look back on it and you realize, hey, that could have gone south, like that could have gone crazy, like any scary experiences like that?
Yeah, I do. Actually, my first solo trip, it was a 59.2 mile hike through the Endless Mountains, and that's an area in north central Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And it's a it's a linear trail, so it's not a loop or anything. So I drove up there. I arranged for a shuttle to take me 59 miles away from my car, which during the whole ride, this is my first time out by myself. I'd probably only been backpacking 2 months at this time. I probably bit off a little bit more than I could chew. Whole time we're driving, I mean, it's taking about an hour, and I'm just like, you mean I have to go past this, and I have to hike through this, and I have to hike through this? It was intimidating. And I'm talking to this old guy. He's probably like 85 years old, and he's running over snakes in the van, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Why did I do this? I could be home right now. So he drops me off, and I got my waterproof boots on and my cotton t-shirt and my cotton shorts on, and I don't know, 3.5 days worth of food, because it's probably going to take me. I packed enough food for 4 days, and I start hiking, and I'm thinking I'm going to do 15 miles each day. So 59.2 miles, I'll be done, 4 days, no problem. The mountains just killed me. It was uphill right away. Starts raining, everything's rubbing. I'm getting, scars here and cuts here. I see a bear at about mile 7, and I'm just like, all right, no problem. I saw a bear the week before. So it was like the only second time in my life I've ever seen a bear. And I'm still hiking, and then I make it to about mile 10, and I'm just smoked. So I set up camp, and I don't know anything about anything. I got my tent up, and I'm proud of myself for that. I think I ate spaghetti that night. And backtrack a little bit. I planned this trip out, and my dad helped me pack the food, and he's like Mr. Organization and Mr. Planning and everything. So I had 4 days of food planned out, each day in a Ziploc bag, and each meal in a smaller Ziploc bag with the calorie count of each meal. So I'd be able to track how many calories I'm consuming, because this was in July. So I knew I was going to be burning a lot of calories. I need to eat a lot of food and make sure that I'm, maintaining my caloric intake.
Yeah.
So I eat the spaghetti, and I'm just smoked. And I throw the bag in like the fire pit in front of me, and it's about 8:15, and I call it a night. My eyes like close immediately. I fall asleep. I hear this like really loud crunching, and I look at my watch, and it's like 8:45. So I've been asleep for half an hour, but I'm a little disoriented. It was raining outside all day, so my clothes are hanging. So I'm like naked in my tent, and all I have in my tent with me is my cell phone, my sleeping bag, my knife, which is still at this point too big than it needs to be, and a tomahawk, because for whatever reason I thought I needed to bring a tomahawk on this hike with me.
There you go.
So I get up in the tent, and I just hear this like crunching, and I hear this like, and like I can look out the fly, and I see these bear paws like in front of me, and they're muddy, and they're like big, and they're wet, and I'm just like, if I was wearing pants, I'd be crapping them at this time, because like I'm by myself. I'm 10 miles off the road. I'm still at this point 50 miles away from my car. I haven't seen anybody on this trail yet. No cell service or anything. And like I'm naked in my tent in the middle of the night. And next to me in my vestibule is my pack with all the rest of my food. Right in front of that in the fire pit's like the half-eaten Mountain House meal with spaghetti still in it.
Yeah.
And I'm just there, and I'm like, I have my tomahawk in one hand and my knife in the other hand, and this bear's like right in front of my fly, like right here, and I can't see him because my rain fly's here, but I can see his feet right in front of me, like this.
So he's 2-3 feet from you.
Yeah, he's like 3 feet max. He's like
Holy
this.
smokes.
And I'm just like, the whole event was probably 90 seconds, but it felt like, 10 minutes at the time. And I'm thinking like, this can go a couple ways. Like, this bear can like try to get in my tent, and I'm going to fight this bear, and it's going to hurt me. And I'm still 10 miles away from a road, 50 miles away from my car. Or this bear is going to come in the tent. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to kill the bear, but then I'm not going to have a tent for the next like 3 days, and I'm not going to be able to get back, and I don't even know where I am. Or like, the bear's just going to kill me. And I'm just like thinking this, and I'm just like, I'm sweating bullets, and I'm just like sitting there like, this is going to happen. And then, like I said, probably 90 seconds later, the bear just went off and just like started, crunching through the bushes again. It just completely got, disinterested. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I didn't eat for pretty much the next 2 days because I didn't want to open food up, because I didn't know what I was doing. I knew that it smelled the food. And I ended up finishing, it was like 59. I ended up finishing early on the third day, and I just went the whole time. I didn't sleep. I didn't, like I said, I didn't eat, and I ended up losing like 12 pounds in 3 days because I was just moving fast and not eating.
Just trying to put miles between you and that bear.
Trying to put miles between me and the bear. And I mean, there's tons of bears. I mean, but that was probably the scariest thing. My heart still races when I see it, just because I couldn't see the bear's face. I could like hear its breath hitting my fly, like a T-Rex from Jurassic Park. I mean, I know it's not that big, but like that's how I remember it. And just seeing its like massive like paws, or like muddy paws under the rain fly, and just being like completely alone. And I didn't actually see anybody for a day and a half later. So even if something did happen, like, and I was bleeding, like nobody would have found me for at least a day and a half at that point. So
holy cow.
getting worked up just thinking about it.
Yeah. I can imagine. So like in that moment when you were sitting there just hearing the bear just on the tent, like were you even able to think about, because people say like, well, if a big cat attacks you, you got to fight it, but bear, try to be still, be calm, maybe even play dead. Like, were you thinking about any stuff like that, or was it just like, like, were you locked up, or were you like high strung? Like what was the attitude?
I was kind of locked up. I mean, I remember being like, you have to make yourself really, like, black bears and grizzly bears are different. Grizzlies, you're supposed to play dead. Black bears, you're supposed to make yourself big.
Run them off.
Be the dominant one. But I'm there like stark naked in my tent with like, I can't get big in my tent.
You're like, how am I supposed to feel dominant?
Yeah, exactly. So remember thinking that, and just remembering like, if something does happen, like this tent's just gonna collapse on me, and I'm just gonna be like rolled in all of this, fabric, and I'm not gonna be able to I'm gonna be helpless. But it went away. I've probably seen, 3 bears ever. That was one of them. And usually they're just, they're just curious and they want to mind their own business. But at the end of the day, it's still a wild animal, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think approaching it with caution is definitely the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Since then, has your bear strategy changed? Do you carry spray? Do you carry a revolver? Is there anything strategically that you do differently?
I carry bear spray now. Usually, if I know I'm going into bear country, some areas in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of bears. Other areas and counties, there's no bears at all. If I go down to Shenandoah National Park, where I know there's going to be bears, I bring bear spray, mostly because my girlfriend has heard that story before and she's more comfortable. She still hasn't seen a bear, so she's got that fear about her. I think the biggest strategy I do now is I don't sleep with my food on me or like an open bag of food right next to me. So I'll hang a bear bag usually, which, try to hang it like 10 feet up and 10 feet out from, which is actually very hard to do. And the last time when I was on Old Loggers Path and I was trying to do that, I told myself I'm going to get one of I think it's called a Ursack. Have you heard of that? Ursack? URSAK. It's a Kevlar bag, and you can actually tie it to the trunk of a tree. And it's been like grizzly tested and everything, where they can't get into it.
Even if they get a hold of it, no worries.
You just tie a square knot against the trunk of the tree, and they can't get into it. Just because finding a tree that has, a branch that far away from the trunk.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the getting it out that's the hard part, especially if you're in like a bunch of pines.
Exactly. And I'm always sitting there at dusk, or in the middle of the night with my headlamp throwing like, this heavy carabiner up. And I know one day it's going to come down and like crack me in the face, and I can never hang it properly. So what's the point? What's the point of hanging it if it's not going to do its job anyway? So they're less than $100, I think. And I think it's a wise investment for someone who goes out in bear country a lot, at least to keep them away.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll need to check that out. I remember I hike so much in Texas and the South. We straight up get lazy about it. Like there are
Yeah.
camps where, we've cleaned our cooking pots just like right next to the campsite. And then, we'll have raccoons like in our camp. And then you wake up and you're just like, get. And it's just an annoyance, really. There's no danger. It's just, you just kind of feel dirty and gross if there's raccoons crawling all over your stuff. But the couple times I've gone, up north and out west, we've hung a bear bag, and then kept everything in a bear canister. Like when we went to Grand Teton, they assigned us a bear canister, but I realized like that thing, because it's made out of just like, I guess, ABS plastic that's, 3/4 of an inch thick. And that is a very heavy way to bear proof stuff. And it sounds like that bag you're talking about, that Kevlar, probably makes a lot more sense.
Oh yeah. Hanging it, I don't know what it's like out west, what the trees are like, but out here on the East Coast, those trees don't exist. And I get so frustrated. I just, I'm throwing a fit about it at the end of the night. I'm tired. I'm throwing this thing up in the air and it's not even going to work. So I'm done with that.
Well, kind of wrapping it up a little bit, you've obviously gone through just a ton of different adventures, gone through a bunch of gear, lots of different types of hikes. For people who are either considering getting into backpacking or people who have just kind of dabbled, maybe they went out on a hike with some friends or they're like just starting to get into it, is there anything that I guess you wish you would have known when you got into it? I mean, obviously you mentioned some things like the huge knife and the cotton clothes but is there like any one lesson that you would tell like new folks as they're getting into this?
Yeah. Listen to the people who have done it before. I think it's important to go out there and make your own mistakes, but if you don't have to make the mistake of, wearing the cotton t-shirt or, not bringing a physical old school map with you or, whatever it is, if you don't have to go through that, then, you're going to make your mistakes on your own anyway. Why not make your own mistakes? Don't repeat mistakes that, experienced backpackers have already made. So I think that's my advice. Just let's listen to the veterans.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. And I wish I had taken that seriously, but I know that I'm just stubborn. In fact, that one of the earlier episodes was me and my buddy Kyle. I think we just called it lessons learned through failure. And it was basically times where we had just, plowed our way through something, not, took the advice of others and just bought some gear that ended up failing on us, or we brought something we didn't need. But I think your point kind of summarizes all of that.
Yeah. It's important to make the mistakes, but you don't have to make the dangerous ones. You don't have to make all of the same ones. So there's a lot of resources out there. Do your research. I didn't do any research. Sometimes I wish I had, but part of the adventure is learning and making the mistakes on your own.
Yeah. It seems like nobody tells too many stories about the events that just everything went off without a hitch and everything worked perfect and the weather was bluebird sky the whole time. There's always a little bit of a thrill and kind of the excitement and the danger and the unexpected stuff.
All right.
But I think you're right. Keep it safe with that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Well, anything else you want to throw out there or anything else you want to cover?
Not really. Like you said, if you're planning on doing it, just get out there and give it a try. I haven't talked to anyone who's tried it and hasn't liked it. So go at your own pace. They say hike your own hike. Yeah. And promise you'll have a good time.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, spring is upon us. It's going to start warming up here and it's going to be beautiful hiking and camping weather. So
all right.
Thank you, Adam, for joining the chat. It was a whole lot of fun. To everybody listening, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.